That game went so quickly. I can't believe it. It's been 4 hours of gameplay. I mean, all of that happened in just 2 hours? How? I mean, how, really? How? Because my players would have taken a week to get just there, and we're talking about, I don't know, what are we doing? So, we're talking about pace in your games. It's the silent game killer. How are you handling it? And if your game is dying, this might be why. Greetings and welcome to this week's video. My name is Guy and we're talking about something that no one really thinks much about, but we've all experienced it. Game pace. This is a throwback, by the way, to one of the very first videos that we ever released on this channel, but I took that and I mulled over it and updated it, and so this is what you're getting. So, sessions that don't seem to go anywhere, that drag out, or sessions that flash past so quickly we barely notice the time. How do we control this experience? How do we capture that immersion and not the drudgery? This week's sponsor is Dungeon Fog. If you don't know who they are, check out the full details at the end of the video. If you do know who they are, then you know that they are awesome. We love you, Dungeon Fog. When we think of pace, I'm not talking how fast the characters can run around in a single round. I'm talking about physical time ticking over and whether or not we as players of the game, that's including the GM, experience that time. If we don't notice it, then the pace is fast. If we notice it, then the pace is slow. So this video is broken into 2 parts. The first one is quick and easy solutions, stuff that you can apply to your game tonight, for example. The second part is a little bit more complex, but you can master it. And if you do, I think you'll be a really, really great GM. So, part 1. We're all in the same burning boat, we really are. Pace hits us from 2 vectors, as far as I can tell it. It hits us from the GM side and it hits us from the player side. I had a GM a few months ago who was adamant. It was totally up to the players to set the pace of the game. I believe, in my opinion, that this is complete rubbish. And here is why. The players can slow the pace of the game down in 3 ways. So, trying to talk to one another and just going around in circles, and they just talk to death. They never actually come up with a plan. Not knowing their character's abilities and skills and having to pause to look them up all the time. I think I got a +5, I don't remember. Not reading the intention of the group, and instead of acting, doing nothing. I don't do nothing. I just wait. Who is responsible for fixing this? The GM or the players? Both are responsible, and here is how. Example number 1. When the group has discussed a plan, disagreed, discussed, disagreed, gone around and around and around as the player, as a player, the character should take a stand. Your character should just say, right, enough. I will follow your plan, or I will follow your plan. But we need to follow the plan. As a GM, once the argument has done a circle once or maybe twice, you interrupt them with an NPC who bursts in, "My lord, something has happened." An incident. The wall collapses because there's an ogre on the other side of it. Something that forces them to either adopt their idea or to ignore everything they were ranting and raving about and just to act. Alternatively, both player or GM could say, "Guys, stop. I'm stopping this game. We're going in circles. We must make a decision and we need to move on it now, please. This is not role-playing. This is now just arguing." And I think that's a very important thing to bear in mind, is that both sides, the GM and the players, can do that. When it comes to characters not knowing their character abilities and skills, this is incredibly frustrating for everybody involved. Again, though, as a player, what do you do to fix it? Well, just know your frickin' abilities and your skills and stuff. Read the bloody book. If you have a bad memory or that sort of thing. Make notes for yourself. Don't slow everybody else down because you're too lazy to invest in actually trying to move the game forward. Okay? There are online options that you can use. There are 0 excuses these days, right? Really, there are no excuses. as a GM, your most powerful tool is it's not knowing the rules or to making up a solution on the fly, because what that does is that enables the player to remain ignorant. All you do is, if a player is delaying, is you say, you find out, I'll come back to you. Then you move on to the other player characters and you engage with them. You get them to do their thing. Once you've cycled through all of the other PCs, and then you get back to that player who's still going, if they're still looking up something, you say, your character doesn't act this round because they're confused. They're lost in their own thoughts. You can act next round. So start looking up what you want to do next round now. Yeah. I have done that a few times. I have done that too many times, as a matter of fact. Players who want to do something different and then they just don't do it. Players who fail to see the bigger picture or who want to act alone, that kind of splits the party up. There's nothing wrong with that. A split party is a fun party to play with. I really enjoy it because you can then bounce between each group, leaving the last group on a moment or a cliffhanger and that sort of thing. It really works. The rogue is trying to break into a building. You have them make some stealth checks, and just before the outcome, a guard comes to stand right next to them. They freak out, and you go, and the guard will come back to you. Next. Okay, so that could be really fun. That keeps the pace moving along very rapidly if you jump out just at the critical moment. In the event of a player declaring their character will do nothing or just wait, well, you nod. And then you ignore them until you have dealt with everybody else. And then you come back to them and say, is your character doing anything? Really? Character's still not doing anything? Okay. And then off you go. Just ignore them for the rest of the round. Don't spend time trying to drag something out of them. They obviously don't want to do anything. As a player, you might want to engage or help your fellow player characters. If they're kind of going, if they seem frustrated or if they seem disinterested, here is a chance for you to jump in as a great player and interact with them and say, hey, I want you to come with me. I need your expertise. That sort of thing. I mean, that's what you can do. Part 2. Welcome to Part 2. This is where you need to step up your game if you want to step up the entire game. How do you do it? How do you manipulate time and plot to keep the pacing going? Well, it's easy in theory and tricky in practice, and that is what you have to do. You have to practice. I had to do it, and it takes a long time. So maybe I'm a little bit slow, but it does take a long time. So the party is doing something. Let's say they're trying to cross a raging river. The river is swollen with rain. There we go. You've done your job. You've described the river, the broken trees, the remains of a bridge that hang like a skeleton over the cold, frosted waters. All that wonderful stuff, okay? But the party has reached a stalemate. They don't know how to proceed. One member has gone looking for another crossing lower down. 2 members are setting up camp because they want a long rest. And a 4th member is just waiting. The game has stalled. The one going alone declares, once I'm out of earshot, I'm going back to town. I need to do some shopping. What do you do? I mean, your game has ground to a halt. Camp set up, nothing, shopping. Okay. Now, you hadn't planned anything because you intended them to build a bridge using the old trees on the side of the river and then to cross it. Or, there was something, but you didn't realize that they were just going to stop because they've either got disinterested or they're tired of this thing. So anyway, because of the actions of the PC, the decisions that you have made, you have been now you find yourself being in the situation of not having anything to do. Now, you could throw in a random encounter, but that doesn't get them across the river. They're just going to fight that, and then they're going to probably take a long rest after the encounter because they did a fight, right? Or they're going to fight it and go, oh, it's too dangerous. No, we're going somewhere else. All right, so that's not going to work. So an encounter won't work. The river is suddenly drying up. Well, that's weird. Why would that happen? Your solution lies in understanding your plot structure. So we talk about on this channel, we talk about the 3-act structure, a beginning, a middle, and an end. And we also talk about the 5-step process, which has a similar kind of structure. And each of those steps is broken down into its own little micro steps, a beginning, a middle, and an end. So that means that on average, you have 9 periods during your game. Let's call them markers. You have 9 markers to every one adventure. On the 5-step approach, which I've spoken about as well, each of those steps would have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And so that would give you 15 markers. Whichever one resonates with you more, either one of them, you got 9 markers or 15 markers. So you should be able to keep track of where you are, what marker you are at, fairly easily. And pacing is about how often those markers trigger. The bridge event that you've landed in. Which one of the markers is it? Where is it meant to be? Is it part of the middle marker of a journey? In other words, this is the middle section and they still have yet to get to the conclusion. Is it meant to be the introduction to a journey? By looking at the marker that you're on and which marker is coming next, you can begin to find a solution. So let us say that let's say that the bridge scene occurs in the second act of your adventure, or on the 5-step, that's roughly where discover plot is not plot. So let's somewhere around there. Marker number 5, somewhere there. But it was meant to be an introduction for that particular act. It was meant to introduce the characters to the point. The next marker, let's say that is coming up. Okay. So we go, all right. So if this was meant to be, hang on. What was the middle marker meant to be? The PCs discover a tomb of a long-dead king and must journey through it. Okay, so they were supposed to go, they find the bridge, and then they get from the bridge to this tomb, this thing that we're supposed to be finding. Now, your original plan was that once the PCs had crossed the river, they find a landslide because of all of those storms that you set up, and an entrance to a lost tomb. Quickly you realize if the landslide happens on this side of the river, it gets the PCs across the river in a hurry and into the tomb. It solves 2 problems. So by looking at the next marker, you can pull from it and just move it in a little bit earlier. However, the one PC has drifted away and wouldn't see the landslide, and also the landslide couldn't happen because you described this area as flat. And only on the other side are there hills, because you knew you needed a landslide later on. So you could throw in some earth elementals. Maybe they've been disturbed by the campfire that the 2 PCs are building. Or the landslide that happens later on, they've been disturbed by that. They could attack briefly. But the moment one of them takes damage, let's say something along those lines, it then dives into the river itself and causes a slight landslide or a disruption in the water flow, and the PCs can get across the bridge. It's not a bad idea. You're linking from the next marker backwards. Both of these have, they're both pretty straightforward and they're pretty obvious. So what if the river suddenly explodes because 2 massive water beasts are engaged in fighting? Their bellows are so loud that all PCs hear it, even the one gone shopping. The 2 monsters fight, breathing massive amounts of frozen water at each other. And in their battle, they change the flow of the river. Or they reduce it, or they freeze it. The PCs can now sneak across. Those are basic solutions. Okay, so look at the marker that's coming up, drag some inspiration from that into what is currently happening. Now, the more advanced solutions that you can do is to take a step beyond the next marker. What is the next act? What's the next major step? What happens after they get to the temple? So according to your plan, the PCs would find an amulet of extreme power, and that later on a cult would try to steal it from them. So Act 3 is the cult stealing from them. If your PCs are unsure of what to do, as in this example, it means that they're not really getting your adventure, or they have no idea how to get your adventure. You've been too secretive about the tomb, they don't really know where they're going, so they have no drive. This saps your pacing considerably if your PCs are lost. If they don't know what to do, they're not going to be doing anything. So all that you need to do is try and pull your acts closer together, shuffle things around. So have a look at this. In our example of the cultists in Act 3, who are then going to try to steal the amulet that the PCs found in the tomb in Act 2, if the PCs never cross the damn bridge, the whole adventure ends. They don't find the amulet. So here's what you can do. Get the cultists to arrive at the same river with the PCs. But now, instead of the cultists stealing the artifact, they try to enslave the PCs. Or maybe they hire the PCs. There is a temple on the other side of the river. Go into it, find an amulet, everything is yours except for the amulet, which is ours. Or they just attack. It's ours, the temple is ours, you'll not get that amulet. seeding that there's an amulet there, and there's some wonderful combat going on. I mean, it's absolutely brilliant. And then we discover that there are cultists, that there's an amulet. It just makes your story even better. What now happens is your third act, though, is missing something because you've got the cultists, right? Well, no, you now just change it. Instead of it being the cult members who you've now already used, you replace it with a dragon or a gnome collector, a vampire lord. Take your pick. Your plan remains intact. Your structure remains intact. You've just changed around bits and pieces and changed the name of the thing at the end. Now, I know it's really easy to come up with when you are just sitting and you are just playing, well, when you're sitting thinking about it. In session, however, your brain can sometimes fail you and you're like, oh, yeah, what should you take away? I mean, what can you add? What can you do? The most important thing is that what is totally sacrificable is your plot structure, your structure. Pull from one to the other and just swap them around to keep the story going. That's absolutely critical. Another thing that I would suggest you do, and this is simply based on driving the timing forward, is have a clock that you can look at just off above the heads of the characters, and then you can reference that clock and go, okay, we've spent an hour. We've done an hour now of just dialogue. I need to kick this game up. I need something to happen. So you might need to inject something, pull from a different marker, just add in a random combat. I mean, that's really, really how it can work. Now, your group might be different. You might have 5 players and you go, okay, and every hour I want a combat and I want something social. Okay, well, after an hour of social, you need to have not an hour of combat, dear God, that's going to slow down, but you need to have a combat in there. Now, obviously, if your players are having a great time and everyone is engaged, screw the clocks. But I find that seldom lasts for more than an hour or two. Your players, they wind down. So test yourself the next game. Watch the time and trigger an event every 20 minutes. Switch it up from social to combat. See what it does to your pacing. And once you get used to that, once you kind of get used to that rhythm of going, okay, I need to add in something, I need to do something, then you just punch it up. Then you can go, okay, 40 minutes, 40 minutes, 40 minutes, 40 minutes. It's tough, but you have to practice. And the only way to practice is to do it. Anyway, I think that's very, very, very important. Now, usually I reserve this for the end, but it also happens to fit in this week's topic. So Dungeon Fog is the battle map maker that I have used since they launched. I really, really, really enjoy their map making, and they actually help with pacing. Well, to be fair, any map helps with pacing, right? Provided that you can do it quickly. And that's one of the things that I like about Dungeon Fog, and that I've done this before a live show, and people have watched me doing it. It's build a map in 10 minutes before my live game, and it actually looked pretty good. It didn't look like I'd only done it in 10 minutes. So that's a really, really, really good indicator in terms of if you don't have any time, Dungeon Fog is really good at saving you time. I mean, the assets and miniatures, all of those things should never slow down your pacing. You should never sit there going, oh, I've got the mini, I've just got to find it in my 10,000 minis. No, don't do that. Don't let the players wait. Send them for a bio break. Send them for drinks. Get them going somewhere. Just don't stop to fix something that slows things down. Anyway, that's it from me for this week. What do you do to make your games faster? I hope that you hit the subscribe button to make your games go faster. That might work. If people are bored, if they're searching for things to do, or if they're just doing mundane and dull stuff, you need to improve your pacing. That is the bottom line, and that's what you've got to do. So yes, hopefully that will help you. A little word from our sponsors. Dungeon Fog this month has released their new asset pack, Ancient River Sites. There's some cool new props in there. I'm always blown away, by the way, with the responsiveness of the Dungeon Fog team to add in props that the community ask for. So the community has this, they have a Discord and you can go and say, I want this prop, I want that prop, I want that prop. And when they release a pack, sometimes they've dropped in a few of the packs that the people have asked for, which I think is brilliant. And they do it almost every second month, I suppose. Anyway, so that's why you would get a subscription, is you get all of those things on a very regular basis. I truly think it's worth it. Now, if you do think it's worth it, use the code GreatGM, and you'll get a discount when you sign up with Dungeon Fog. Give them a week, give them a month, see what it's like. I promise you, you won't be disappointed. Anyway, until next time, I wish you and yours the very happiest of gaming. I'm going to cry. Streaming? This is the moment where he realizes that there's a little bit of panic going on. Wow. Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm going to turn the chat on really quickly so that I can see you all laughing at me.